So today I'm going to go ahead and start off with a question. In the past year, how many of you have pirated something, whether that's music, movie, TV shows, or video games? Can you go ahead and raise your hands? That's actually not a surprising amount to me, due to the fact that about 70% of all 18 to 29-year-olds have pirated music, TV shows, or movies is kind of a big deal. And honestly, it has actually affected me as well. About 2 years ago, I started to get into PC gaming, which caused me to be on my computer most of my free time, which is 8+ hours a day. And honestly, that means that I was on my computer, whether that was playing video games, watching Netflix, watching YouTube, or any of those other things that people do. And honestly, one of my friends came up to me and was like, hey man, you know, you can get video games for free that would normally cost you $60. All you have to do is go to this website and click download. And I thought, wow, that sounds like a really great idea. You know, I don't have to pay for it anymore. I don't have to throw my $60 away. All I have to do is just go to this website and click download. Well, I guess in the back of my mind, I thought to myself, well, this is probably wrong because it's probably illegal. But in hindsight, I never really thought, oh, I shouldn't do this. I shouldn't do this. This is wrong. I thought, wow, $60, that's a lot of Chick-fil-A. So all this talk about piracy might have you wondering exactly what is it. And basically it's the illegal use or distribution of software protected under intellectual property laws. Now you might be thinking, well, that's a lot to take in. And honestly, yes, it is, because it is a very big deal. So today I'm going to go ahead and talk to you about two different forms. And the first one being online piracy, and the second one being counterfeiting. But first off, I'm going to go ahead and tell you that online piracy is the fastest growing form of piracy. You might be thinking, well, obviously, that makes perfect sense. Well, that's definitely because there's so many advancements in technology, because computers nowadays, you can just walk up and buy one for fairly cheap. And honestly, most people have access to computers or internet, and you can just go ahead and go to whatever website your friend tells you is a good idea to go to, and go ahead and click that download button. And it's also very easily accessible, and there's a lot online. You can get movies that have just released in theaters right now, today. I mean, if you just go onto whatever website that is your movie watching website, because everybody has one, you just go ahead and type in, oh, Marvel Avengers 2 or whatever, and now you're watching it. Well, to me, this is kind of a big deal now. Back then, not really. Back then, I would just go online and think, man, I need a copy of Windows 7. Plug in my USB, and there we go, I have it. But it's really not that easy. And honestly, a lot of people don't really think about what happens, what goes on behind the scenes, and what people do to basically prevent anyone from getting copyright or getting anything that happens to them. And whenever you type in, you don't have to type in those registration codes, is a form called cracking. And basically this is to copy commercial software illegally by breaking it and breaking any sort of copyright protection they have on it or any registration codes that are required. And that's kind of interesting, that someone's just able to go in there and break it, and now it's free for everybody to use. And that's why whenever you download your movie or you download your game or your software, you don't have to type in that registration code. So I'm going to go ahead and move on to counterfeiting. And this isn't as common as it used to be, but it still does happen. It still is out there, and I actually have experienced this myself. Probably when I was in middle school, I wanted to go ahead and buy a brand new game. And I walked into this store that I found on Craigslist, and I thought, and this guy said, well, instead of it being $60, it's only going to cost you $40. And I thought, wow, that's a really great deal. Well, that's because counterfeiting usually is sold at lower prices. Usually they go ahead and download this on a separate disk, and the best way to know something is counterfeited is if it's too good to be true, it probably is. Now, most people think of piracy as this sort of someone just uploads it online and just steals it and that's it. But there's also cases of reuse, which most people don't know exactly what that is, but it's a kind of a form of hacking. And hacking is the use of a computer to gain unauthorized access to data in a system. So reuse is basically whenever someone uses it again and they use it to make their own money. if you go ahead and look here, you can see two separate games, actually. Now, they might not look very different. You might think, well, they almost look like the same game, except one has a little bit different picture. Well, that's actually not true. They're actually the exact same. They're actually two different games. One is a game called Minnow, and it's basically created by Zeo Interactive. The other is a game called Tetris, which most of you have probably heard of. Now, whenever Zeo decided to release this game, they directly copied every single thing that Tetris had. And most of the time, people will release games, they will reuse games and release them, some popular stuff to just get downloads. And they will just change a couple of things, but just change enough to avoid copyright infringement. But the court found that this expression was not inseparable from the underlying ideas of the game. And while taking a single one of these elements may not have been infringement, this case it was. Well, that's kind of obvious if you can look at it. If you look at it, you can see that both of them are very similar, both in the size of the game, the shape of the pieces, the size of the pieces, and the way that the game actually was, the score actually worked. Whenever the pieces would come together in both of the games, the board would clear and the little score would pop up. They both were exactly the same. So piracy, yeah, it's a big deal. And honestly, I know it more than I have before because I learned something about it. And I realized how much effect it has on people. But you might be thinking, well, I mean, obviously, if you just think about it, you can really see that it's morally wrong. But actually, me personally, I developed my own game. So these are going to be a couple of pictures of my game that I developed. I use a software known as CryEngine to basically develop a game that was able to use sound. I can actually make the entire game and upload it on the internet with no charge to me. And honestly, whenever developing it, I spent probably about 15 to 20 hours just on my computer trying to develop this thing. And that made me realize how much work goes into it, how much effort people really put into it. And I thought about it. And I went, how is it fair for me to just steal something from someone else? How is it fair if I were to go to someone's house and I were to mow their lawn or clean their house and they just said, oh, I'm sorry, I'm not going to give you any money for that, that was just free. Well, that's what piracy is. Piracy is basically taking someone's creative ideas, taking someone's work, all the effort they put into it, whether that's years and years or maybe 6 months, and just clicking a simple download button without giving any credit to them. And I think credit is really earned for them because if you put so much work into something, if you try your best, you put all your creativity into it, and someone just goes ahead and takes it for free and gives you no kind of kickback for it, that kind of discourages you from ever doing it again. And honestly, I think you should really support the creativity that goes into something. I honestly think you should support the person because they've put their work into it, and I don't think it's fair if you were to work at a job and someone just didn't ever do anything for you, you just did it because you had to do it. I mean, that's kind of the thing that I realized when I was going through this. Thank you very much.